Tropical Storm Bret heads for the Leeward Islands. Tropical storm watches are up for Barbados. Showery heavy rains will be heading slowly northward and moving into the northeast at the in just a day or two, and it'll last into at least the start of the weekend. Severe weather in parts of the Gulf states and Florida. A whole lot of weather going on, which is why you tune in every night at 7:35 p.m. to watch the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area. If you've got a truck, get over to Omni because they have more mulch, topsoil, and sand than they know what to do with. What they want to do is sell it to you, and you can put it down in your yard, make your home look just spectacular. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
And our affiliate, Tempest by Weatherflow. You can get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. And the link, the referral link, is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, you get
10% off anything that you get from Tempest.
Which is better than two mints in one.
Yes, indeed.
You don't see Certs commercials anymore.
There are a lot of things you don't see from our era anymore, Joe. When was the last time you saw kennel ration dog food?
Oh, right. No, of course. And a Comet commercial.
A Comet commercial.
And you can buy Comet at Home Depot for like $1 for the giant can.
Right.
Oh, well.
Or Ajax laundry detergent. Remember with the white knight?
Yes. Ajax will make your mouth turn white. Ajax tastes like dynamite. Ajax will make you pay tax. So get Ajax and pay tax today. Do you remember the Comet one?
Yes.
Okay. Then we won't.
I'm not going to sing that.
All right, no problem. Okay, so here we are. Welcome to everybody on the chat board. Those of you watching in the background, too, welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. We're on Monday through Thursday at 7:35, Sundays at 11 a.m. Tomorrow night, everybody mark it down. It's an 8 o'clock start time. Mr. Rayo has things to do. And also, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn the notifications on so you never miss us. And one thing we're not going to miss, Joe, is rain because it does look like with this upper low and this southerly flow, we could get we're going to see a soaking rain. I mean, we've been seeing that here in the southeast. I've already gotten probably about 2 or 2.5 inches of rain over the last 3 days, and more on the way for the next 2 days. But you can pretty well see a substantial rainfall of 2 to 3 inches or more, I think, up in the northern mid-Atlantic to southern New England, and higher amounts to add on top of what's fallen in the southern mid-Atlantic through the southeast.
Yeah, one word I think that will not be coming into our vocabulary beginning on maybe as early as Thursday, but more likely Friday into the weekend, at least up here in the Northeast, is drought. I know that there are places in recent weeks that have been reporting rather dry conditions, but I got to tell you, Joe, from what I was able to see, and we'll see it, I'm sure you will show it as you always do on the WPC 7-day precipitation outlook. I mean, for this area of the country, the Northeast, we are looking at what? We're looking at a couple of inches at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
GFS pumped out, I think, about four plus inches over a fairly large area.
So it's going to be wet here, folks. And once it begins, it ain't going to end for a while. But, you know, I'd rather have what we're about to endure as opposed to down in the, let's say, Texas area, where they are going to be experiencing, well, they are experiencing now extreme heat. But, I mean, really, what they're going to be experiencing not just for tomorrow, but for maybe the next 8 to 14 days. I mean, incredible heat, excessive heat for portions of central and east Texas. And there is a slight chance of excessive heat going all the way. This is for the end of the month, June 28th through about July the 3rd, according to the Climate Prediction Center. As far north as Chicago and Des Moines, Iowa, and Omaha, Nebraska. I mean, it's a broad area of excessive heat, a slight chance, and a rather large area of moderate risk of severe or excessive heat, not only for all of Texas, most of all of Texas, but Oklahoma and Arkansas, Louisiana, parts of Missouri, also Kansas. So if you gave me the toss-up between excessive heat and excessive rainfall, I'll take the latter as opposed to the former.
Yeah, it's also cheaper. You don't have to run the AC as much under excessive rain.
Right.
That'll keep the temperatures cool, and it's been on the cool side, especially with this onshore flow now that we have. So that's keeping temperatures down. Even here in the southeast, the temperatures have been averaging 5 or more degrees below normal because of the clouds and the shower and thunderstorm activity. Although, funny thing is, if the sun comes out for any period of time, you warm up really quick. Atlanta got to 85, but their normal high is 90 for this time of year.
In case in point here, if you had asked me yesterday what the high temperature would be here in the Hudson Valley, I went for considerable cloud cover. It might be a few pokes of sun, and temperatures maybe no better than the mid or low 70s, well below seasonal normals. I mean, the normal is around 81 degrees. Well, guess what? For a few hours this afternoon, the sun broke through, and the temperature soared all the way up to or even above 80 degrees. So all you need is just a little bit of sun, and up go the temperature. Now, we may have had an unstable atmosphere, but we didn't have any kind of a catalyst or triggering mechanism to produce thunderstorms, although there were a few pop-up showers to the north of me. But in the days to come now, as you just said, that area of moisture coming slowly northward up along the eastern seaboard will be arriving here maybe as early as Thursday, certainly by Friday, and on into and through the upcoming weekend will set the stage for a rather wet and rather humid stretch of weather. Yes, it may actually feel kind of muggy up here for several days. We may, even in spite of the fact it's going to be cloudy, and in spite of the fact that we're going to have the ongoing threat of precipitation, those dew point temperatures may actually make you reach for the knob on your air conditioner just to stay comfortable. So there you go.
Well, we've got flash flood watches up for parts of northeast Georgia, western South Carolina, and North Carolina. I suspect that we're probably going to see more of those going up over the next couple of days up and down the eastern seaboard. You can see the heat advisories and the excessive heat warnings that are covering much of Texas except the northwest and the far west. We also have a severe thunderstorm watch across southern Louisiana. We also have severe thunderstorm watches up for northwest Nebraska and then cutting across central North and South Dakota. Some air quality issues surrounding the parts of the Great Lakes and also in western Wisconsin and into Minnesota, but nothing in the east from that standpoint. And that's one positive here is the fact that the way the upper flow is setting up to bring up all this rain with a southerly flow, you need a northerly flow of some point to bring down all the smoke, and that's pretty much been cut off. And for those of you who like it really cold, we actually have frost advisories and freeze watch. Those are freeze watches or freeze warnings? No, freeze warnings up for parts of northeastern Nevada and parts of northeastern California and into south central Oregon. So a little bit of cool weather with a deep trough out in the western part of the United States. You can see the upper low on the satellite circular bands of showers through Kentucky and Tennessee into Alabama and Georgia. And then there's this comma that extends out, producing what almost looks like a bit of a broken line of thunderstorms in eastern Georgia. And then out in the Gulf of Mexico, there's an east-west line that running into southeast Louisiana. Actually, that part of the line is moving southwestward. The rest of the line is moving southeastward. And we've got some showers and thunderstorms, a lot of lightning strikes going on. And this is not, to me, it doesn't. Rain is going to be the bigger deal with this area as it moves northward, and you get into the convective part of all of this that'll probably start to develop, especially not so much Thursday maybe because of the east wind, but Friday and Saturday. There'll be some thunderstorms. I don't think that there'll be the severe thunderstorm types because rain is the bigger deal here.
And I think the flow, Joe, for the next few days here in the Northeast is going to be basically an east-southeasterly airflow. So you were talking about how, in order to bring down some of that smoke from Quebec and adjacent provinces, we'd need more of a northerly flow. That ain't happening. And the east-southeasterly flow, if anything else, will actually help to deflect that smoky atmosphere away from this part of the country for a while. And of course, also the rain will help to cleanse the atmosphere for a bit. So I don't think the last thing I think we're going to be worrying about over the next several days, maybe the next week or so, is going to be the smoke.
Yeah, the upper flow. I'm just kind of drawing it in now with this cutoff low that's that's sitting over Kentucky and Tennessee. The upper flow from northeastern Canada is basically going southwestward into the Great Lakes, which is why you see we saw this air quality alerts that were up for parts of the Great Lakes and back over into Wisconsin and Minnesota, because that's where the smoke is going. And this system eventually is going to get kicked out to the northeast, which is only going to enhance the southerly flow for a while, and that again will keep the smoke away. Meanwhile, we do see some thunderstorms going on up in the Dakotas. You can see the lightning strikes showing up in the last few frames. The west looks pretty nice clean air in much of the southwest, and hardly a cloud in the sky. And here's the northeast satellite loop. Let me give this a refresh here, and yeah, there's just a little hint of smoke, not very little, but for the most part, the cloud line is just hugging the coast. Hasn't really quite pushed far enough north into upstate New York, but all that is streaming up to the northeast, and you see some convection down in South Carolina. It looks like a little thunderstorm came and went in northwestern Pennsylvania. Otherwise, it's pretty quiet. Here's the radar in the southeast, and very busy with downpours. Nothing severe, but just the downpours themselves, and a couple of flash flood warnings up in west central North Carolina, but we'll probably see more in the next 2 days. And then we head down to Louisiana, where we've got a bunch of severe thunderstorm warnings going on in a cluster between Lafayette and New Orleans. That part of the line is moving more to the west, while the showers in the Gulf of Mexico are moving southeastward. You see some showers and thunderstorms and a couple of one or two severe thunderstorm warning and two special marine warnings out in that area. And then we take a look up in the Dakotas, where we've got a few severe thunderstorm warnings going up at the moment as well. As that plays out, some showers and downpours in eastern Montana and parts of central Wyoming. Nice big triangular severe thunderstorm warning just issued for a small section there in Wyoming, and some showers scattered around in the Pacific Northwest. Now, I'm going to jump to the rainfall here. This is WPC's new rainfall forecast, which carries us for the next 7 days. So the red is 2.5 inches, and the darkest red, it's hard to delineate between the darkest red and the purple. So the level of red that you see in eastern Pennsylvania and western New Jersey, that is actually the 3-inch mark. So let's call it 2.5 to 3.5 inches of rain, pushing all the way up into the Catskills to about New York City, 1.5 plus into upstate New York and much of western New England. A little less as you go up into northern, into Maine and southeastern New England. And just a clobbering of rain to the south in Virginia. You've got some areas showing 4 inches or more In North and South Carolina, 3 inches or more. And by the way, when you get from North Carolina southward through Georgia, this is on top of already what's fallen in the last few days. Anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of rain has already fallen, so you're going to put down probably another 3 or 4 inches of rain on top of that. Also, big rains up from Montana into the Dakotas here in an east-west band of 1.5 inches to as much as 3 inches. And that even extends down into parts of the Central Plains. So there's been an ample amount of rain in parts of the Central Plains. Nothing in the Southwest for a change. It's all behaving itself. So I'm pretty much like, this is the kind of thing, though, this is the kind of situation with the southerly flow, Joe, and the moist flow, where there could be some, believe it or not, even though they're pushing 2.5 to 3 inch rainfall amounts over a 3-day period, there could be some upside in some areas.
Oh, sure, especially if you take into account the possibility of some convection. You could easily put down 2 or 3 inches in one good heavy dose of rain from a thunderstorm. So sometimes you have to spread that precipitation forecast out a bit, 2 to 4, or 3 to 5, or 3 to 6 inches. And as you just pointed out, they've already had, well nigh more rain than they know what to do with across the Carolinas. And now on top of all of that comes more rain. So this is going to be a wet week here in the east. And as I said, here in our neck of the woods, the Northeast, especially out west of New York City, Pennsylvania, where it has been categorized as everything from abnormally dry to verging on drought, that's going to go away. We get all this rain that we're anticipating over the next 7 days, and that's going to be diminished considerably. So, and for those I always say, watch out for what you hope for. Watch out for what you pray for. It probably some people out there say, it's terrible. It's so dry. I wish we had rain. And watch out, because sometimes you get what you want, and sometimes you get more than what you want. And then you wonder if it's ever going to get dry again. So,
well, you get more than you need.
Yes, absolutely.
Brandon Doherty hitting Super Chat tonight. Thank you, Brandon, for hitting the tip jar, and we appreciate you being here. And also David Schwartz. Happy birthday to David Schwartz's mom, who turned 94 today.
God bless her.
Saying, and thank you for the tip jar hit, David. South Florida by my mom was 94. Oh, I'm sorry, I misread this. I'm sorry, I misread this. Her temperature was 94. She hasn't turned 94. Okay, that was my bad. I just read it too fast. South Florida by my mom was 94 today, and I just saw my mom was 94 today, with humidity around 80% and heavy thunderstorms this evening. Well, we went through that yesterday when we were talking about parts of Louisiana with the temperatures in the 90s and dew points in the mid 70s. I mean, that's just brutal.
Now, we hope that she does make it to 94. Anybody, in my opinion, anybody who makes it to 90 or higher has had a good, long, life. And my mom made it to 90 before she passed in January. Joe, your mom's getting up there.
Yes, she will be 89 in August. 89.
It's a good long life.
It is. It is. The Storm Prediction Center, as we take a look at what's going on with severe weather risks. It's marginal to slight risks today across the lower Gulf states and into Florida. That's already played itself out, or is playing itself out. We've got the little blue severe thunderstorm watch box up in southeast Louisiana, and also in the central part of the Dakotas into Nebraska. We've got this north-south severe thunderstorm watch box there. The tornado risk today, I always like to at least show the tornado risk. 2% up in the Dakotas and 2% in Louisiana. Now, tomorrow, slight risk from the southern plains to the western plains going, and then it turns marginal risk back up into the Dakotas again. Also, marginal risk. So this is Wednesday into Thursday for much of all of Florida except for the southwest and southern Georgia and southernmost Alabama. General thunderstorms which this is valid up into Thursday morning, cuts across southern New Jersey and extreme southeastern Pennsylvania. And then we look at day 3, which is for Thursday. Marginal risk in the western plains. The general thunderstorm line in the east for Thursday now is from Delaware and roughly the Pennsylvania-Maryland line southward into the Tennessee Valley, through the southeastern states and down to Florida. And I guess they're looking at the fact that you're still going to have a marine flow on Thursday, so that probably means that you're probably not going to see convection, especially with the upper low so far south and west on Thursday. But by Friday, if we could go to Friday, which is in their long range, and they're not only going to tell you whether predictability is too low or potential too low. But I'm sure tomorrow when we look at this, we're going to see the general thunderstorm line pushed up for Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, I think each day, and I think especially so for later Saturday and Sunday, we'll be looking at convection, possible heavy shower and storm activity, and it's going to be it's going to be a mess. Let's put it that way. I mean, you want to see if you don't want rainy weather, you want to see high pressure building in, dry weather, lower. That's not happening. Not through the weekend. Not through Monday, even on into next week on Tuesday. Next Tuesday, there may be some hope. I mean, if you want to take the long-range progs at face value, next Tuesday we are presumably going to have a weather front, a cold front, crossing through Pennsylvania, heading toward the east. That could set the stage for showers and storms here on Tuesday of next week. But also, if it continues to move, if it's progressive, that should bring in a swath of drier air, which we'll be desperately waiting for, I think, by next Tuesday into our area. So
I kind of thought that maybe Sunday we could see some improvement, because the first upper low, if it gets kicked out a little faster, you get that opens up a small door for some improvement before the next trough swings in. I've got the upper air, so let's see what that has to say. And of course, you see the cutoff low down in Tennessee this evening, and the cutoff just sits there. But what it does do is gradually it turns the flow in the east to a southerly flow. So here we are for Wednesday night, and now we're into Thursday morning. So the flow along the east coast is coming from south to north. So all that moisture that's down there starts to push up. You've got the big ridge up in Canada here, but that's also retreating northward. So there's room for that moisture to move up. That's why it hasn't moved up so far, because the upper high has been a little bit further to the south. But now that gets out of the way. And, of course, this upper low does nothing but drift northward slowly from Thursday and Friday. And then on Saturday, it starts to open up and move eastward. And this is where it might give us a little chance for a break on Sunday, because the trough goes by. I mean, it's just right, weakens and goes by. But now you've got the second upper low that's dropping down into the Great Lakes and moving into the Northeast for Monday and Tuesday, with a bit of a negatively tilted trough there. So that kind of smells like showers and thunderstorms with that. But you're right. Once that goes out, then the ridge that's over Texas starts to shift eastward and begins to punch up toward the Great Lakes as opposed to the Northeast. It tries to move eastward, but only gets so far, and then there's another trough that comes down. So as soon as that ridge starts to build, here comes the next trough and shortwave, and kind of crushes that ridge as we go into the first days of July. So pretty interesting pattern overall, considering it doesn't seem like any kind of heat ridge can set up for too long before something comes along and breaks it down.
Yeah, but as well as I, if those people who are hoping that we don't go into a protracted or prolonged spell of heat and humidity, the summer, astronomical summer, officially begins tomorrow, and that area of extreme heat over the nation's midsection is just a little bit too close for my comfort. I'm sure if it's not July, it'll be August, that we're going to go through our fair share of heat and humidity. So,
well, that's in the long range.
long.
Right. That's a ways down the road.
Yes.
All right, so how this plays out on the surface, so that surface high is going to start to give way, and the GFS actually has some rain into southern New Jersey by Wednesday morning, maybe a loft, but it's more Wednesday night and Thursday that first batch of rain moves through, and then there'll probably be several other bands, and I think when you look at this, especially this time of year, the models have a tough time sort of really picking out just exactly how much rain we're talking about here. It tends to underdo uh, the amount of moisture, but you can see Friday afternoon, especially across Virginia and North Carolina into the southeastern Pennsylvania, showing rather numerous downpours, and they push up northward Friday night. Then they fire up again Saturday afternoon, especially in upstate New York and into Pennsylvania. And there you go. Now on Sunday, yeah, there's some scattered stuff that pops up in the afternoon on Sunday, but maybe we catch a break with a few breaks of sun, and then they pop up again on, I'm sorry, this is Saturday afternoon. Here's Sunday afternoon. There's some there, but it's not everywhere. And then Monday, you start to wait for this next trough and cold front, and you see showers and thunderstorms Monday afternoon and evening through New York State, Pennsylvania, down into Virginia, and then again on Tuesday with the front going by. And once that goes through, then it looks like we get maybe a day or two or three where we don't have to deal much with in the way of some showers and thunderstorms. So that's a plus.
Yes, and now I guess what we'll do, since we've pretty well discussed everything regarding.
Well, we still have to do Bret.
I was just going to say, now that we've done everything regarding the contiguous United States, the lower 48, now why don't we move to the tropics and check on Bret? So I knew we were going to go to Bret, but I just wanted to.
Well, I decided to do it at the end, toward the latter part of the show, because the new advisory will be out by the National Hurricane Center, so we'll take a look at that. And yes, indeed. So Bret continues to move westward. So let me bring up the forecast map. And nope, that's the wrong forecast map. It's where is it? I thought it was Office of Winds, Interactive, Cone, and Static Images. Okay, here we go. So one thing that's changed from yesterday is they've taken out the strengthening to a hurricane. And it makes sense. I mean, we knew that this thing was going to run into shear, especially when it gets close to the islands. It still has time to strengthen a bit, and it may, but it's looking less likely that it's going to achieve hurricane strength, because it may just run out of time before it starts to have to deal with some serious wind shear when it approaches the Caribbean. 12.4 north, 49.5 west is the 8 o'clock advisory. They did up the winds to 45 miles an hour and moving west at 18. And one of the things that occurred today was the fact that, at least for a while, the center actually became exposed. There were thunderstorms in all quadrants, but you could clearly see the circulation center was really kind of missing thunderstorm activity, but then it fired up again this afternoon, and the Hurricane Center pointed that out in their discussion. And actually, you could see a little convective burst and some lightning strikes, probably fairly close to where the center is. So perhaps that mid-level wind shear that they were talking about that has shown up at this point, maybe it's relaxed enough that it will allow this system to strengthen a bit, but eventually it's going to run into, and I've got, I'll just roll this back because I have it already to Saturday. Wait, why is this? Oh, okay, so hold on a second. This was this past Saturday, my fault. I have to go forward. So you can see this map shows the areas of strong winds in the mid and high levels of the atmosphere, and the Bret itself is right here. So it's sort of outside the belt of very strong winds that lie well to the north of the system. So it's in a fairly light to moderate wind shear area. But as it approaches the Caribbean, you start to see where the low center is now underneath that orange. That's 50 knots of shear that it's experiencing, and that's going to tend to rip most of the thunderstorm activity apart from the center. And then that shear continues as it goes into the eastern Caribbean, and in fact, it loses the low completely when we by 84 hours as we head into Saturday. It's just about all gone. So meanwhile, we do have also the system that's behind it. I want to see what they said on the update for that. My mouse would just behave itself.
Brandon Doherty on the chat board says dry air is getting into it, it being Bret, as it approaches South America. It has to get through what he says is called the wall. The wall is an area just northeast of South America, and there's a ridge there. So, you heard about marathon runners, especially in the Boston Marathon at the 20-mile mark, they hit the wall. And I guess what Brandon is making reference to here is that as we get toward the end of the week, this system is going to hit the wall and may very well meet, if not with its demise, but a very significant diminution or diminishing of its strength as we move on into the upcoming weekend.
Yeah, there's almost always wind shear in the eastern Caribbean. Every once in a while it goes away, usually later in the season. I'm going to see. This is the RGB, because I see David said there's an RGB loop on Tropical Tidbits, but I'm going to see if this is probably the same one. This is a water vapor imagery of Bret. I mean, you can see there's a little bit of dry air in there, but there's also, it's a fairly wet environment here. So the thunderstorms look like they are blowing up again. So we'll see how it goes. The second system, by the way, behind it, the Hurricane Center has an 80% chance of that developing into a tropical depression in the next day or two. But as this moves to the west, it's also going to have to eventually deal with wind shear. It's also going to get involved in that whole belt of strong winds that runs across right along 20 degrees north, and it gets kicked out to the northwest, and then eventually also gets eaten up by those upper level winds and disappears. And you think about it, for the time of year, that's the most likely outcome for both of these systems. There's just still too much going on with regards to the way the upper air wind fields are. There's just way too much going on for these systems to be able to strengthen to a level where it's a problem.
And Brendan Doherty is asking the both of us, Joe, why do some storms move through rough wind shear but still turn into hurricanes further west? And my answer to that is, if they go through rough wind shear and then as they continue on their westward trajectory, they move out of the wind shear and into a more a better environment for strengthening. They can indeed, and we've seen this many times before, they can make a dramatic or very good comeback and strengthen indeed back to tropical storm or hurricane force, as long as they don't. The one thing that pretty well knocks them out of the ball game is interaction with, let's say, a landmass like Haiti, for example, with those very tall mountains. That really rips storms to shreds or anything. But I mean, wind shear, you can go into a very adverse area of wind shear, but as long as you can still manage to hold together somehow, and then eventually move out into a better environment for tropical activity, tropical cyclone activity with less wind shear, you can indeed come right back and see your winds come back up and see some strengthening. So at least that's my answer for Brendan there.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be one of those cases where that happens, because there's too much. Oftentimes when that happens, you have a situation where you go from an unfavorable strong wind shear environment, and then the trough pulls out, and the surviving low-level center, then eventually migrates it to an area where there's far less shear. I just don't think that this is one of those instances because there's just too much shear going on across the Gulf of Mexico, across the Caribbean, across the subtropical Atlantic. There's no real place for it to go where it's not going to encounter some wind shear. So my bet is that it eventually just, devolves into an open trough and then goes away. So
And I remember in the 70s. I wonder if Dennis Cassie is online. I think he is. We had a tropical system, tropical storm or Hurricane Dennis down, let's say, also in the Caribbean. And at one point, because of very potent wind shear that it encountered, I mean, the storm was left for dead. I mean, you didn't think that this storm was going to be anything anymore. And all of a sudden, like several days later, after somehow the remnants moved out of this dome of wind shear and into a more favorable environment, the storm just suddenly came together real quick and made a big comeback. So we have seen that happen. But I agree with you, Joe. In this particular case, I think the broad area of wind shear that Bret is encountering is a little bit too large. This big swath of wind shear, and there's really not enough time. I mean, the storm is moving on a general westerly course, and it may very well make landfall, whatever it happens to be it a tropical system or the remnants of a tropical system, may make landfall Central America by the end of the weekend or the start of next week. So I don't think it's going to happen that this thing is going to be able to make much of a comeback.
Steel Whisperer is new to the chat board. Welcome, Steel Whisperer. It's snowing in Washington State. That's crazy for June. No, well, they got a deep trough out there in the west. So I'm just looking at. I'm just sort of perusing some of the forecasts out there. I pulled out Stevens Pass, and they are 5,200 feet up. And it's cold up there. I mean, it's in the upper 30s. It's 37. But they're only forecasting rain there. So I imagine that maybe it's in a few places, some of the really the highest peaks might be seeing some snow in Washington State. But you got to go way up. I mean, in this case, you're up 5,000 feet and you're not seeing it. So you probably have to go up even higher than that. So anyhow, Briller Jeopardy.
That's almost a 20-degree difference. If you go like down dry adiabatic wise, 5,200 feet, my goodness, you could be like a good 20 degrees chillier up there as opposed to down at sea level. So
yeah, Janet Dunn says, I just left Seattle, and yes, they were expecting snow in the Cascades, maybe as low as 4,500 feet. So there you go.
There you go.
Okay, so let's do a little bit of Briller Jeopardy. It was very challenging last night, so let's see how much success tonight does bring or doesn't bring.
Okay, hang on for a minute.
I'm not good with these 100-degree day things, so.
I want to get that my messenger page up, which is where Mr. Briller sends both you and I these questions, and somehow it's on occasion a little difficult to bring up, but here it comes.
And when Joe gets the questions, I don't see them, and when I get the questions, Joe doesn't see them, so we don't.
Right.
So right. We're playing along here on What's My Line,
so we're gonna
or guess that temperature.
How many days does each of the 5 cities, which we will mention here, how many days does each of these cities hit 100 degrees? And we will start with city number 1. How many times does Oklahoma City hit 100? Or how many days do they hit 100?
All right, so we had, if I remember correctly, we had for Dallas, it was 22. And Oklahoma, I'll say 25.
Well, you lost not a considerable number of steps for the alpine climber, but it's a little bit too much, Joe.
Okay. Well, Frank Riccio said 17, and and Tim says 5. Latex Dream says 5. Chuck Cardillo 19. So I'm guessing it's lower than that. Norm Roberts said 10. Louis Arizio said 15.
Well, there you go. One is a little bit low and one is a little bit high.
Between 10 and 15?
Yeah.
So is it 13?
Is it 13? Yes, it's 13.
It's 13. Okay, yes. 13. All right.
Now, next one. Houston.
Now, Houston's a funny place because it's right near the coast, but not on the coast. So it's close enough to the coast that sometimes the breeze comes off from Galveston Bay and moves northward. So I'm going to say, I don't think it's a big number, so I'm going to say 5.
Oh, you were right on track, Joe. Just a wee bit on the high side.
So it is lower than 5.
Yes, in fact, the chairman writes in parentheses after the city of Houston, he says, "This one will surprise."
Rich Rothmansky said 3.
And Rich is right. Only 3.
And so did Patrick Darcy. Frank Scalera's second runner-up at 4.
Right. So there you go. Miss Spallerite says, wow. Latex Dreams also says 3. Now, here is number 3, Jacksonville.
Jacksonville, Florida?
Yes.
I'll say 2.
Ooh. So did Frank Scalera said 2.
And Janet Dunn said 1.
Well, what other number might
3?
There you go.
Frank
3.
Riccio, Johnny Quest, all saying both of them said 3.
Yep. 3.
And so did Maggie P.
Now, yesterday or last night, you may recall, one of the cities that we had to guess, and I failed horribly with this, was Phoenix, Arizona.
Right, with 111 or something like that?
112. Tonight, not too far from Phoenix. In fact, a friend of mine lives down there. Tucson.
Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah.
Okay. When it's a big number, you could say a big number and it still might not be big enough. So I'll say 94.
You went big, and I think your friend, the Cliff, went over the cliff.
All right, so I went too high.
Yes.
I knew it was less than Phoenix, but I didn't know how much less.
A lot of people. Johnny Quest says 100. Christopher Alley, 112.
No, you're...
Media, 100. Trish Baraccio, I love you, Trish, 10.
Michael Azara says 75. Bobby Whitaker said 75. Maggie P. and Tim Latex Dream says 88.
Well, the 75 is...
William Uber said 77. WABC degrees.
75 is close. It's still on the high side, though.
72 for Frank Scalera.
Come down a little bit more, Frankie.
So are we in the 60s?
We're in the 60s, yes.
Like 68?
Like exactly 68.
La-di-do-di-do-di-do-di-do.
And the last one of the night, this is great, living in the tri-state area, New York. New York will hit 100 degrees, but they do it like every third or fourth year. Not every year.
And sometimes longer.
Sometimes even longer. You're right. And meanwhile, these places, climatologically hit 100 at least once, and in fact, more than once during the year. St. Louis, Missouri.
St. Louis?
Yes.
Oh, God. I'll say 6.
No.
James H. said 14. That too high?
You folks have to come down a little bit.
Am I too high?
Yes, you're too high, too.
3.
3 is right, and Michael McGuire got it, too, at 3.
Yeah, these are, this is difficult. This is difficult.
I mean, I know it's not that St. Louis isn't a place that can get hot weather. In fact, in 1966, Joe, Busch Stadium, the old Busch Stadium, they replaced it about 10 years ago. But when Busch Stadium first came on the map in 1966, the All-Star game, the baseball All-Star game, was played in mid-July, and that All-Star game coincided with temperatures in St. Louis of something like 105 degrees, and they had a thermometer on the field in the sun and recorded something ridiculous like 150 degrees.
Wow.
And Casey Stengel was a coach on the National League All-Star team, and they asked Casey Stengel, Casey, what do you think of this brand new, beautiful stadium, Busch Stadium? And Casey looked around and said, well, it holds the heat good. It was one of those, it was one of the cookie cutter. You know, back in the 60s and 70s, a lot of the new baseball stadiums were circular, enclosed, and Busch Stadium was one of the first. And I guess that's what Casey meant by holding the heat in. There was no place for the heat to escape except straight up. And it was very, very hot. So, yeah, St. Louis can get hot. Thankfully, I'm sure for the people who live there, not too often.
All right. And on that note, I'm going to now go and watch the rest of Perry Mason, The Case of the Lame Canary. So, which I'm about halfway through it. So that's what my night is going to be before I go to sleep. And thanks everybody for being here tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which of course, as we know, is brought to you by our affiliate Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, you get
10% off.
And Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com. And Louis Orizio was commenting, I see Rayo is scratching on paper. Yes, what I was doing was I was scratching down the names of the people who contributed to the tip jar tonight. Brandon Doherty, David Schwartz, Ken Musillo, thank you very much for hitting.
Oh, I missed Ken. Thank you, Ken.
And thank you, Ken. And somebody also mentioned, where's Mrs. Rayo? She might actually be watching right now. She wasn't on at the start of the show because she was taking the dog out.
Oh, okay.
Well,
speaking of which, I got to do the same, too,
yes.
Before it gets dark.
Yes.
And then all the night creatures come out. So we'll see you guys. Late start tomorrow, 8 o'clock. So we'll see you tomorrow night at 8 p.m. All right? Nighty-night.
Night-night.